Vex had been the station administrator at Port Nexus 7 for 12 standard cycles, and in that time, he had developed a profound appreciation for routine. Routine was predictable. Routine was safe. Routine meant he could go home at the end of his shift without filing incident reports that would inevitably be read by someone important, who would ask uncomfortable questions. The biological threat assessment scanner was the pinnacle of routine. It sat there in the customs checkpoint, humming its pleasant little hum, turning green for every single traveler who stepped through. Crystalline shardlings who refracted light in 17 dimensions, green. Nebulans who were technically sentient gas clouds held together by electromagnetic fields and sheer force of will, green. Even the sludge barons, who were basically ambulatory biohazards that left trails of questionable fluids wherever they went. Somehow, still green. 10 years, 0 threats. Vex loved that scanner more than he loved his own spawn, and he was generally ambivalent about his spawn to begin with. So when the human stepped up to the scanner and it immediately started screaming like someone was murdering it with a plasma torch, Vex experienced what could only be described as a profound sense of personal betrayal. The human looked startlingly average. Brown hair, brown eyes, wearing a jumpsuit that had seen better decades, and carrying a data pad that was held together with what appeared to be some kind of adhesive strip. He was humming something under his breath and looked about as threatening as a particularly docile fungus. The scanner, however, disagreed. Violently. Red lights flooded the checkpoint. A klaxon that Vex didn't even know existed started blaring. The holographic display above the scanner flickered through about 15 different warning symbols before settling on 2 words in angry crimson text. Unclassified survivor. The human stopped humming. He said with the tone of someone who had been through this exact scenario before and was already tired of it. Is that bad? Vex stared at the display, then at the human, then back at the display. The scanner, he said slowly, his translator struggling to keep up with the sheer confusion in his voice, has flagged you as an unclassified survivor. Okay, the human said. What does that mean? Vex said, and then paused because he genuinely did not know. I have no idea. This has never happened before. Have you tried turning it off and back on again? Vex had not, in fact, tried that. Mostly because the scanner cost more than his annual salary for the next 600 years and he was not about to be the person who broke it. But also because the scanner was built by the technocracy of infinite precision, who did not build things that malfunctioned. Their products either worked perfectly or exploded in a way that would be studied by engineers for generations. There was no middle ground. Please remain where you are, Vex said, stabbing at his communicator with one of his 3 primary manipulator appendages. Do not move. Do not touch anything. Do not breathe heavily. The human raised his hands in a gesture that Vex's cultural database informed him was meant to indicate surrender or compliance. Just so you know, the human said, I have a delivery schedule, spare parts to Sector 12. If I'm late, I don't get paid, and if I don't get paid, I can't afford to refuel, and if I can't afford to refuel, I'm going to be stuck here filing vagrancy paperwork. Nobody wants that. Vex did not particularly care about the human's financial situation. Vex cared about the fact that his scanner, his beautiful, perfect, never-wrong scanner, was having what could only be described as a catastrophic existential crisis. And the human, Jake Morrison, according to his travel documentation, was just standing there like this was a minor inconvenience. Krath arrived at the checkpoint with the kind of speed that suggested she had been waiting for something interesting to happen for approximately 7 years. She was a Warvok, which meant she was roughly the size and shape of an upright bear made out of steel plating and bad attitude. She had survived 3 galactic wars, 2 assassination attempts, and 1 memorable incident involving a malfunctioning gravity generator and a cargo bay full of extremely angry livestock. She was not easily impressed. This is your emergency? She said, looking at Jake, who waved awkwardly. This small soft thing? The scanner flagged him, Vex said, gesturing at the still screaming display. Unclassified survivor. Krath's expression, insofar as her face could form expressions, shifted from bored to mildly interested. Run it again. They ran it again. Same result. Angry red lights, klaxon, unclassified survivor in text that seemed to be getting larger and more aggressive with each scan. Huh, Krath said. They ran it 3 more times just to be sure. By the 5th scan, Jake had sat down on the floor and was playing some kind of game on his datapad. The scanner continued its mechanical screaming. Other travelers were starting to back up at the checkpoint, casting nervous glances at the human who had somehow broken galactic customs. Okay, Vex said, pulling up the scanner's threat database on his terminal. Let me see what this thing is actually detecting. The database loaded, then kept loading, then continued loading for what felt like several geological epochs. When it finally finished, Vex felt something in his primary nerve cluster that his species had evolved specifically to warn them when they were about to become someone else, slunch. By the infinite void, he whispered. Krath leaned over his shoulder. She was quiet for a long moment. Is that number correct? The system says, Vex said, his voice climbing several octaves, that this human contains antibodies, immunity markers, and defensive biological responses for 47,312 distinct galactic threats. Jake looked up from his datapad. Is that a lot? The average spacefaring species, Krath said slowly, has immunity to approximately 20 common pathogens, 40 if they have a robust vaccination program. 47,000, Vex repeated because saying it out loud might make it make sense. It did not make sense. Jake scratched his head. I mean, I got my shots before I left Earth. Tetanus, hepatitis, the flu thing. Is that what it's picking up? Vex scrolled through the list. You have immunity markers for Rigelian death spores. Never heard of them. They are a Class 5 bioweapon banned by 17 different galactic conventions. Okay. You also show resistance to void plague, crystal rot, neural fire, and something called meat-dissolving syndrome, which I am not going to describe because I am trying to keep my last meal where it currently is. Jake frowned. I did haul a weird cargo container about 6 months ago. It was leaking something green and it smelled like old gym socks. Made me feel pretty rough for like a day. Krath and Vex stared at him. Rough, Krath said flatly. You were exposed to what was likely an active biohazard and you felt rough. Yeah, I took some cold medicine and slept it off. Why? That container was probably carrying Zendari fungal colonies, Vex said, his translator barely keeping up with the speed of his words. They are used to terraform hostile worlds by breaking down organic matter at the molecular level. Huh, Jake said. That explains why my sandwich tasted weird. Vex closed his eyes. Krath was making a sound that might have been laughter, or might have been her preparing to charge into battle. With Warvox, it was hard to tell. We need a xenobiologist, Vex said. Now. Dr. Quilnex arrived in a flurry of lab coats and barely contained panic. She was a Quilnari, which meant she had approximately 12 too many limbs and not nearly enough survival instincts. She had never left the safety of her laboratory except for mandatory fire drills, and even those made her nervous. Seeing an actual unclassified survivor in person made her vibrate with what might have been excitement or terror. Possibly both. This is unprecedented, she said, circling Jake like he was an exhibit at a museum. Utterly unprecedented. Do you mind if I take samples? Will it hurt? Jake asked. Probably not. Then sure, I guess. Quilnex produced a medical scanner that looked like it had been designed by someone who had never seen a living creature and had only read about them in horror novels. She waved it over Jake, and it immediately started beeping in a way that suggested deep concern. Your baseline body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, she said. Yeah, that's normal. Normal? Quilnex's voice went up several octaves. That is the optimal growth temperature for 70% of known bacterial species. You are a walking incubator. Jake shrugged. I feel fine. Your planet, Quilnex said, consulting her datapad, has an atmosphere that is 21% oxygen. Is that weird? That is enough oxygen to make your entire planet a fire hazard. Most species require between 8 and 12%. How have you not all combusted spontaneously? We have fire departments? Quillnex made a sound like a kettle reaching critical pressure. Your medical records indicate you had something called chickenpox as a child. Yeah, everyone gets that. It is a persistent viral infection that remains dormant in your nervous system for your entire life and can reactivate at any time. I mean, sure, but it's not a big deal. Not a big deal, Quillnex repeated. She turned to Vex. He has a permanent viral infection that he describes as not a big deal. Vex was beyond words. He just gestured vaguely at Jake in a motion that encompassed the entirety of his existential confusion. Quillnex continued her examination. With each new discovery, her agitation increased. You consume ethanol as a recreational activity? Beer, yeah. That is a solvent. You drink solvents for fun. I mean, when you put it that way, it sounds bad. Your stomach contains hydrochloric acid at a pH of 1.5. Is that strong? It could dissolve most metals. That's probably why we don't eat metal. Quillnex sat down heavily, which was impressive given that she didn't have traditional legs. Your planet has an active molten core that generates a magnetic field. You have tectonic plates that regularly shift and cause catastrophic seismic events. Your weather patterns include rotating columns of air, moving at hundreds of kilometers per hour. 70% of your surface is covered in a liquid that most species would consider corrosive, and you just live there, you call it home. I mean, Jake said, it's not that bad once you get used to it. Nothing should be able to get used to that, Quillnex said quietly. Earth isn't a habitable planet. It's a nightmare forge that produces impossible biology. Krath, who had been silent for most of the examination, finally spoke. So the scanner isn't malfunctioning. The scanner, Quillnex said, is working perfectly. It has correctly identified that this human should not exist, and it has no idea how to classify something that is biologically capable of surviving conditions that would kill 99% of known life. Jake raised his hand. Can I go now? I really do have a schedule. Everyone turned to stare at him. No, Vex said. No, you absolutely cannot go. Word spread through Port Nexus 7 with the speed and efficiency of a highly contagious plague, which, given the circumstances, was perhaps not the best metaphor. An unclassified survivor at customs. The scanner had flagged a human. Code classifications meant for ancient war machines and planet-killing weapons. The whispers started in the departure lounges and spread to the docking bays, growing more elaborate with each retelling. By the time the rumors reached the station's commercial district, people were saying that humans were a secret military experiment gone wrong, that Earth was a quarantine world that had been accidentally declassified, that Jake Morrison was patient zero of a galactic extinction event, and everyone was already doomed, they just didn't know it yet. The station went into what Vex diplomatically called a heightened state of awareness, which was bureaucratic speak for soft lockdown without actually admitting we're panicking. Docking procedures slowed to a crawl. Ships that had been scheduled to depart suddenly discovered critical maintenance issues that would take hours to resolve. Several delegations demanded to be rerouted to different stations. 3 different species filed formal complaints about being on the same space station as an unclassified survivor. And through it all, Jake sat in a waiting room that smelled faintly of industrial cleaner and anxiety, eating something from a vending machine that claimed to be a sandwich, but was almost certainly lying. And Vex had never experienced this level of bureaucratic chaos. He had filed 7 incident reports, been on 4 emergency calls with station command, and had seriously considered faking his own death and starting a new life on a remote mining colony where nobody would ask him questions. His communicator chirped. It was station command. Specifically, it was Director Threx, who only called when things had gone so catastrophically wrong that they needed someone to blame. Administrator Vex, Director Threx said in a tone that suggested Vex's career was about to become a historical footnote. Explain to me why I'm receiving reports of a galactic security incident at your checkpoint. Sir, the scanner flagged a human as an unclassified survivor. And we are attempting to determine the appropriate response. The appropriate response, Director Threx said slowly, is to classify it and let it move along. Why has this not happened? Because, sir, We do not know how to classify it. There was a long pause. I am sending someone. The someone turned out to be Plex, a xenoanthropologist who specialized in dangerous species. He arrived on the next transport shuttle, carrying a briefcase that probably contained enough emergency containment equipment to handle a small invasion. He was a Mentari, which meant he was tall, thin, and had eyes that could see in about 15 different spectrums simultaneously. He looked like he had been expecting something much more dramatic than a human in a waiting room eating questionable food and looking mildly annoyed. "This is the survivor?" Plex asked. "This is Jake Morrison," Vex said. "Species, human. Origin, Earth. Occupation, cargo hauler. Threat level, unknown." Plex approached Jake the way someone might approach a sleeping predator, carefully, with an exit strategy. Jake looked up from his datapad. "Are you here to let me leave?" "I am here," Plex said, "to determine if you are a threat to galactic security. I'm a guy who moves spare parts from place to place. How would I be a threat to galactic security?" Plex opened his briefcase and pulled out what appeared to be a small library's worth of documentation. "Let's find out." Plex had investigated some of the galaxy's most dangerous species. He had studied the ravagers of the Kron Nebula, who could survive in hard vacuum in 8 starship hulls for nutrients. He had documented the phase wraiths of Dimension 7, who existed partially out of phase with normal reality and could walk through walls. He had even spent 3 months observing the Hive Mind Collective, who were thousands of individuals acting as one terrifying organism. None of that had prepared him for humans. He sat across from Jake in an interview room that had definitely seen better days, his recording equipment set up and running. "Tell me about Earth," he said. Jake leaned back in his chair. "I mean, it's home. Pretty normal planet as far as I know. Water, land, atmosphere, that kind of thing. Your atmosphere is 21% oxygen." "Right. That is highly reactive. Your entire planet is one spark away from a runaway combustion event. We have fire safety regulations." Plex made a note. "Your planet has active tectonic plates." "Yeah, we get earthquakes sometimes. Volcanoes. The ground moves around a bit." "A bit. I mean, cities have building codes, you learn to deal with it. And your weather patterns include cyclonic storms, electrical discharges from atmospheric imbalances, and frozen precipitation that can accumulate to fatal levels. Hurricanes, lightning, and snow. Yeah, that's just weather." Plex felt something in his cognitive center that might have been the beginning of understanding or might have been an aneurysm. "You live on a planet that is actively trying to kill you." "I wouldn't say it's trying to kill us," Jake said thoughtfully. "It's more like it's just existing and we have to be smart about it. Your oceans contain apex predators, large carnivorous animals with multiple rows of teeth. Sharks, yeah. And you swim in these oceans. I mean, not where the sharks are, but sometimes where the sharks are. Sometimes, sure." Plex pulled up a document. "Your planet hosts approximately 8.7 million different species. Most of them are microscopic. You coexist with millions of microorganisms." "That's just bacteria. Everyone has bacteria." "Not everyone," Plex said quietly. "Most species maintain strict biological isolation. Contact with foreign microorganisms is usually fatal. You are covered in them." Jake looked down at his hands. "I mean, I can't see them." "That doesn't mean they're not there." "Okay, but I'm fine." "That," Plex said, "is exactly the problem. You should not be fine. Your planet is a Class 12 death world. The galactic standard for habitable planets is Class 3. Anything above Class 7 is considered uninhabitable by conventional biology." "What makes us a Class 12? Plex pulled up a chart. "Active core, unstable surface, aggressive weather patterns, high oxygen content, exposure to stellar radiation, presence of millions of competitive species, and a biosphere that operates on a principle best described as constant warfare for resources." "That seems dramatic." "Your ancestors evolved by outcompeting other species for food and territory." "I mean, evolution is a thing, yeah. Most species evolved through symbiotic cooperation or environmental adaptation. You evolved through survival of the most violent." Jake frowned. "We're not that violent." Plex pulled up another document. Your recorded history includes approximately 15,000 documented wars. Okay, but we're working on that. You domesticated predatory animals and now keep them in your homes as companions. Dogs are great. They have teeth designed for tearing flesh. They also like belly rubs. Plex sat back. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Earth didn't just produce you, it forged you. Every system in your biology is designed for one thing: survival. You don't just tolerate hostile conditions, you thrive in them. The scanner flagged you as an unclassified survivor, because it has never encountered a species that is biologically engineered by their own planet to be unkillable. I mean, Jake said, we can die. It just takes a lot. Plex closed his eyes. The galaxy has been letting Deathworlders wander around thinking they're average. Are we not average? No, Plex said. You absolutely are not. Vex sat in his office, staring at the formal report from Plex. It was 17 pages long. It contained words like unprecedented, biologically anomalous, and potentially concerning but not immediately threatening. The conclusion was simple. Jake Morrison was not carrying weapons. He was not infected with a communicable plague. He was not a military experiment or a security threat. He was just human. And that was weird enough. Vex placed a call to Galactic Command. Director Threx answered on the first pulse. What is your recommendation, Administrator Vex? Sir, I recommend we create a new classification. Explain. The scanner is not malfunctioning. Humans genuinely do not fit any existing category. They are not threats, but they are not standard travelers either. They are survivors from a death world who have adapted to conditions most species cannot even imagine. There was a long pause. What classification do you propose? Deathworlder, passive designation. Mark them in the system so other stations know what they're dealing with, but clear them for travel. Another pause. Approved. Process the human and let him leave. And Vex? Yes, sir? Make sure this protocol is distributed to every customs checkpoint in the network. If there are more humans coming, I want everyone prepared. Vex ended the call. He walked back down to the checkpoint, where Jake was still waiting, now reading something on his datapad that appeared to be a book about engine maintenance. Mr. Morrison, Vex said. Jake looked up. Am I cleared? You are cleared. We have created a new classification for your species. You will be flagged as a Deathworlder with passive designation. Other stations may react with concern when they scan you, but you are not restricted from travel. Cool, Jake said, standing up and stretching. Can I get a note from my client explaining why I'm late? Vex blinked. You want a note? Yeah. Otherwise they might not pay me, and I already explained the whole refueling situation. Vex printed a formal delay notification and handed it to Jake, who folded it carefully and tucked it into his jumpsuit pocket. Thanks, Jake said. This was weird, but I've had weirder customs experiences. There was this one time on Proxima Station where they thought my cargo was alive because it was making noise, but it turned out the container was just settling. Took 4 hours to sort out. He walked toward the exit. Vex watched him go. This impossible creature from an impossible world, completely unbothered by the fact that he had just forced the galaxy to rewrite its security protocols. Krath appeared beside Vex. You think there are more of them coming? Vex pulled up Earth in the database. Population, 8 billion. Yes, he said quietly. There are more of them coming. Krath was silent for a moment. The galaxy is not ready. No, Vex agreed. It is not. Through the viewport, they watched Jake's ship power up and launch, heading out into the black. The scanner, finally quiet after hours of mechanical screaming, displayed his updated profile. Name, Jake Morrison. Species, human. Classification, Deathworlder. Passive. Threat level, undefined. Somewhere out there, more humans were filling out customs forms, boarding ships, and heading to stations that had no idea what was about to walk through their scanners. Vex went back to his desk and started drafting a memo. It was going to be a long night, and somewhere in the depths of space, on a little blue planet that had no idea it was considered a nightmare forge by the rest of the galaxy, 8 billion humans went about their day, completely oblivious to the fact that they were all walking biological impossibilities. It was, Vex thought, probably for the best that they didn't know. The galaxy had enough problems already.